Here we go. We are back. The Monday morning ELF recap show. I am here with one of the wizards of European football, our man Matt Bressington, up in the United Kingdom after a pretty wild weekend of ELF football. Matt, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm doing good. Appreciate having you on. I think wild is a good way of looking at it. I mean, a lot of blowouts, but some games that are moving tectonic plates in Europe. You know what I mean? Like there was some tremors felt throughout the
Tremors.
landscape. You know what I mean? Like it
That's
was
the
a
way to. That's the way to put it, man.
yeah,
Yeah,
hell of a
it was
one.
kind of
Yeah,
a weekend of
someone's in Spain. You know what I mean? Like that was a
weekend of
crazy one.
extremes
Mhm.
with a few blowouts that were a little bit on the less exciting side, and then a few games that were absolutely incredible and kind of the pinnacle of what this league offers and where we are headed. Good morning to people in the chat. A couple of you, Pedro Navas. Good morning from Madrid. Go Bravos! Yeah, go Bravos. We're gonna be talking about your Bravos here in a second. So, guys, we are going to run through all of our games from this weekend, do a little chit chat. If you're here with us live in the chat, feel free to pop in and give us your thoughts as well. Starting off with a historic game in the European League of Football, the Madrid Bravos playing the reigning champion Rhein Fire in Germany, in Dusseldorf, at Rhein's home stadium, and coming away with a big surprise. Matt, let's talk about this one. Give me your thoughts on this game.
Where to start, man? Like this was such.
Yeah.
Let me watch the game.
Yeah.
Helbig started amazingly. You know, he got hurt. Willie came in, played, lights out. I mean, he didn't throw the ball too much, but had a run centric, obviously idea. Dwayne Obi broke out as one of the best running backs in the league. Uh, just, I mean, just the defense as well. Jalen Embry, phenomenal. Like 2 interceptions on Jadrian. Jadrian didn't have his best game. I think he'll be the first to say that. The Ryan Fire offense never really got started.
Right.
Interceptions, fumbles. Did they get? No, they didn't get a fumble, but they kind of had they just kind of stalled out, forwards and outs,
Yeah.
and never really got started. They have a bunch of key injuries to receivers, but of course, who doesn't? I mean, their leading receiver in second place was Tony Anderson, who's a defensive back. So it was
Yeah.
it got to that point where it was kind of tough for them to move the ball. They get it at the end. Madrid just run straight through the middle with Dwayne Obi. He's such a good runner, and he started off actually as an offensive lineman,
Dwayne
like
Obi did?
back in the day. Yeah, yeah.
Well, he's got the size.
He's got the size. He's got the block. That's what makes him such a good blocker too, because he was
Right.
originally an offensive lineman, like way back when. So he's got that acumen in his bag. You see there, just the long runs. He's so physical. He's so big. He's like Glenn with a little bit more size. Glenn himself played quite well, but yeah, it was the first loss they've had in 16, and I believe it was their first loss since the Leipzig Kings.
To actually take the outright title for the longest winning streak in the ELF to beat the Vienna Vikings from a couple years ago. So I think they ended up tying the record, which that does kind of suck for the Rhein Fire here. Yeah, it was just what you said, man. Rhein couldn't really get it going. Obviously, Harlan Kofi was out, and that really hurt the Rhein Fire offense. Losing Kelvin McKnight Jr. Bringing in a new A this week, short week for him. I think he only had a catch or two, wasn't really involved. And Ryan just couldn't get it going. But the story was just all Bravos, man. We got to talk a little bit about Chris Helbig, who obviously suffered a tough injury. He was carted off on the field, pretty serious injury. A lot of speculation that he's probably not going to be able to come back this year. But we just got to give him an absolute big shout out for getting the Madrid Bravos off on this right foot and setting the tone for this new franchise, starting off 2-0. And you could tell once he went out that the team just played so inspired, man. Madrid just seemed just so fired up compared to the Rhein Fire, who just kind of felt flat and it felt a little meh. And the Rhein Fire are not used to being in this position, man. And I did hear also that a lot of Rhein Fire fans, maybe not a lot, but there was talk on social media that Fire fans were leaving the stadium early, which is not so common to happen in European sport or European football. So they were in uncharted territory there, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're technically the lineal champ now too, because they beat the champ. So they're the Madrid Bravos, and now the lineal champ of the ELF, which is pretty crazy. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was just such like you said, an inspired performance. They kept the momentum even after losing their quarterback, which you
Yeah.
never really see in any level of football. But they kept going. They scored even without their quarterback. They threw a pick, but then they got the ball back quite quickly. And they're without Brian Winter as well on the offensive side for
Right.
the Fire too. So a great game, and people were saying about it being like the biggest upset in ELF history. I'm not on that train because we knew how good the Spanish talent was from a few years back with the Barcelona Dragons.
It's a
So like
good
we knew that these Spanish kit players like came to play, and they definitely came to play this weekend for sure.
Matt, do you think that this is just a hiccup for the Rhein Fire and just a great performance for the Bravos this week? Or do you think this is bad news for the Fire?
I mean, when you suffer your first loss in that long, I think you're going to have a little bit of a hit. I don't think it's cause for concern necessarily. I think they go into the underdogs to Paris, and even if they lose to Paris, they're still going to probably make the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
it's such a hard conference, and I think that one way of the only thing that cuts diamonds is diamonds, and they're the pinnacle of the sport, and
Right.
Madrid kind of showed they're up there too. And that division is going to have probably a few playoff teams, not just Paris, Rhein, or Madrid, but I mean they could all technically get into the playoffs, and they proved they're it. But I'm not red alert. I don't think for the
Yeah.
Rhein Fire. I think they could, even if they suffered a loss next week, they could pick the momentum back up. They've got a key win against Frankfurt.
Sure.
They're going to be able to beat Cologne and Hamburg, assumedly so. So I don't think it's cause for good. Two losses in a season, if they pick up another one, is still a great year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't want this to be too much overreaction Monday. I think this kind of says a lot more about Madrid than it does about Rhein. And then we just also gotta put the spotlight on Willie P, sort of his revenge game, right? Because we interviewed him on ELF Live a couple weeks ago, and he was interested in going back to the Rhein Fire, but they didn't, apparently, from the information that we had, didn't extend an offer back to him. And so he ended up committing to the Bravos. And this dude played just energized, ended up taking a bunch of snaps at quarterback as well once Helbig went out. And you could just feel that energy. Here we see, or no, I'm not sure. Actually, that's a little bit blurry on the highlights for me, but he had a couple phenomenal catches and was really connecting with Helbig before Helbig went out. And then he kind of just took over as the leader there of the offense. Him coupled with Dwayne Obi, man, who you were talking about. You were talking about him before the season because he was a star in the GFL last year, but he's screaming on the ELF scene now with these first two games.
Yeah, he could have been in there first year too. I recommended him to a first teams before he went out to New Yorker. I'm kind of glad that he got the development time in New Yorker, to be honest. But he was one of the best running backs in that league. He averaged a stupid amount of yards. He had a bunch of catches. So he was just kind of the player that I was really excited to come into the league. And he hasn't skipped a beat. He looks phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think, man? Are the Fire, they've got Paris next week. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves. This isn't the prediction show, but what's your instinct on that Fire Paris game? Who takes that one?
I mean, I love the Fire and I love Paris. I think they're both two excellent teams. I'm gonna have to favor Paris, but they were without Anthony Mahomu in the last game, and they could, we'll get to it in a minute, but they could have lost against the Galaxy. So both teams have got something to prove. I think it's going to be one of the games of the year, and I'm absolutely not going to miss that game. Best believe. But if I'm going to lean one way, I'm going to lean Paris, but I would ultimately not be surprised if Rhein Fire pull out a win.
Right. And here in the chat, we got Ding Boom Sista says, Paris is strong, will be hard. Some of their former best players are now with the Bravos and Paris. Thanks. Speaking of, so what did we expect? Yeah, this one just really lit the ELF on fire. I'm not sure if too many people saw this one coming. Here we see the final score 22-10. And we wish Chris Helbig speedy recovery, whatever the situation may be. And I think we, as people involved in the European League of Football, we owe him an applaud and a thank you for what he's done to kind of get that franchise going. We've now got another super exciting franchise here in the ELF kicked off with that. So there we go. That was a big one, super exciting one to start off the week. And then Matt, let's pivot a little bit to a less exciting matchup with another Spanish team. Shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, it was less exciting, that's for sure.
I don't know.
It was a bit of domination.
I mean, depending on what gets you excited. We've got the Raiders Tirol at the Barcelona Dragons. And this was an interesting one. Matt, what do we got? Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, Martin was coming in with kind of the weight of the whole franchise on him. I think that was the kind of thing that I was looking for. Was just it was going to be. I actually picked Barcelona to win because I thought, it was a short week for the quarterback. Boy, was that a cold take. So yeah, Kenny Martin looked great.
Cold.
I was feeling it a little bit. I had to rein it back in, but 5 touchdowns for him on the day. He looked great. He used to run dams all over the place. But I think the big thing was just the Dragons D-line just got overran by the run. Bonatti 144, Hasselvanta 80, Martin himself got 52, and then Tim Tonko, you got to look out for him. He's one for the future. He's just come up from the AFL team. I've had people within the organization and other organizations say that he's going to be Sandro, which I'm not saying, but some people have said that Tim Tonko is the next Sandro. So that's quite high praise from him. Chafin with a pair of touchdowns. Weber finally getting into the game. But the thing for me for the Raiders, obviously they scored so many points. The offensive play calling, the offensive line, so much better than the previous weeks. I struggle to think that it's because they made one change at quarterback. Like it was it was a different team. So I'm a little bit like, where was this? When they had Fulford.
Right.
Fulford looked like he could have ran this same offense. He was a great player in college. So it was a bit confusing on that regard. Levi Lewis showed flashes that rolling out left throw to David, the receiver, for that long touchdown. That is what we expected to see from Levi Lewis. But of course, his offensive line, you can't really do much with it. Defensively, they've really struggled. I mean, they've got one of the worst defenses in the league so far. 63 is, that's an absurd amount to concede defensively, whatever way you look at it.
Man, yeah, this was just absolutely brutal. And it's interesting what you say about the Raiders, like really looking completely different, even from a play calling perspective and how their offense looked and clicked. Just kind of how quickly you can kind of turn things around in football and in this league. And this is a week to week league, man. Like anything can kind of happen week by week and different games. And man, just looking at some of these stats here for the Dragons, 7 first downs to 27 for the Raiders. It's just absolutely brutal. Matt, what do the Barcelona Dragons have to do to have any sort of semblance of competitiveness?
I mean, we ain't got too long, but I mean everything. Get the run game started more. I think that starts with the offensive line. They need better offensive line. They just had so many talent taken from them and put into Madrid. The Madrid team is made up of a lot of former Dragons, Sancho Fernandez, Luke Glenna. Like these are a lot of guys that they missed out on. Just a bunch of the Spanish and former players that were impactful for that franchise. And they just need more offensive line. They need a more advanced scheme. They need defensively. They need to make a lot of adjustments. They need to rush the passer better. They need to get more inside pressure. They need more linebacker play. They need more speed at the positions. They need to stop playing so much cover 2 because they're just getting beat with these outside routes. Like there's just so much to go through of how much I want to change if I was in charge of Barcelona. I'm not, but I mean 23. Points scored, conceded in the fourth quarter. Well, let's be real, the Raiders took the foot off the gas, and it was still that was the most points they conceded in a quarter, and the Raiders took the foot off the gas very evidently. So it was tough.
Exactly. The fact that still in the fourth quarter, when the Raiders took the foot off the gas, probably had some backup players in, and still it was that bad. Here in the chat, Thomas Lustig says this was more the Dragons D being overmatched than the Raiders O being actually good. Interesting point. I think it's probably a little bit of both, but this one just ended up brutal. We won't spend too much more time on it. 63-7 for the Raiders with their quarterback drama, and this was one of the cooler social media pictures right here. With the mid backflip and just a dominating score. Solid week for the Raiders, huh?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
There we go. Now, moving on to a very interesting game, a close game, not a blowout at all. The Helvetic Mercenaries and the Milano Seaman, 2 previously winless teams matched up in Milan. This ended up being a little bit of an interesting one that I stayed up kind of late streaming while in bed. I couldn't really take my eyes off it for a few different reasons. Matt, talk to me about this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I said it during my watch longs. Like, this looks like 2 teams trying to lose. In some cases, multiple interceptions on both sides. Like, neither offense really got started. And I was saying about in the at the time, they kept looking at Ken Hike, and Ken Hike's one of the best corners in the league, and they kept targeting him, and I do not know why for the life of me. He ended up getting a pick. Flores
Yeah.
Calderon is an X guy. They've had him at X throughout this whole time in Milan. They finally moved him to Y, got him open, got a long touchdown. I don't know why it took them so long. I finally saw the Milan team score, which is something I haven't seen very much, and I only saw it twice. But defensively, they're still solid. Zach Blair is one of the best linebackers we have. They had turnovers. They caused multiple interceptions. I think it was, what was it, 3, 2, 3? Like, Aiken had nothing going for him in terms of like the pressure. He was getting sacked down on handoffs, which is just kind of impossible to do. But yeah, like they weren't getting the ball to AFB nearly enough. Like Anthony Brown was like, we said that he needed to get targeted. He got the touchdown earlier, that beautiful corner route to the far left side. And then they never looked at him ever again. And it was just confusing. Like why they didn't look at their best receiver just on short passes. Because with this, they got the worst offensive line in the league, man. Like it was really tough watching Aiken. Like Aiken's a good quarterback. He's just getting milliseconds to throw the ball. And with these deep concepts, it's nothing.
Yeah, Matt, what is their European import situation on offensive line?
They have they have two. They definitely have the Norwegian Stefan Stefansson, left tackle, I think, but I think he's more of a guard. I personally would move him inside. He's just such a big guy. He played for Potsdam, I believe, so he's huge.
Okay, yeah.
I just think they need to move him inside. They have a running back import, but the running back import ain't gonna do much when he has no offensive line. They had Anton Coleman, who I don't have rated as a ELF guy. I think Leo is better, who they had before. And rumor is they had they wanted a deep threat guy, and then they cut someone who's 6'2" and a deep ball specialist, and then they bring in Coleman, who they had for one game, and then cut him as well. So they, the imports, you could probably, I don't even know like who they've got because they just keep cutting and signing players, but they're not looking too good.
Yeah, it's brutal. Here in the chat, we've got a very nice message from Marcus Kintz. Thoughts and prayers to Jamal for that one. We know our buddy Jamal Clay, who sometimes hosts here with us. He's a Mercenaries guy, and this was a tough one. Like you said, man, this looks like two teams trying to lose. I mean, it was still because of the close score was interesting up until the end. Just really nothing going on offense. Of course, yeah, we got to give a shout out there to Zachary Blair, one of the few in linebacker American imports. He's performing well, really doing his thing, but just not the best offensive performances for these teams. But congrats to the Milano Seaman for escaping and getting their first win of the season. The final score ended up being 14-7. This was our Saturday night showdown. Zach Bronkhorst there getting his first win in Europe with them. So that was an interesting one for sure. A couple teams that hopefully can make some improvements on offense. Then to another interesting one that I think was quite a bit more fun to watch. This one was highly anticipated. Frankfurt Galaxy at the Paris Musketeers, two teams in the Western Conference, which is shaping up to be very broadly thought of as the top conference in the ELF this year. These two teams coming in with a lot of hype, a lot of buzz about them, the rosters that they put together. Matt, let's talk about this one. Frankfurt Galaxy, Paris Musketeers.
Yeah. So I said earlier, a little bit earlier, we talked a bit before the broadcast. Unwinnable teams that haven't won. You've got Prague Lions, Enthroners, Mercenaries, and the Galaxy. Like that's insane considering the hype they had early in the year. And I know they've had a hell of a schedule to start off the season. It is tough, and they started so well offensively. First one punt, sure, but then they got fumble recovery by Josiah, the linebacker. He played out of his mind. And then they forced another fumble, just a second drive. They had so much momentum. Never really looked the offense got incredibly started. Kevin Kyle looked phenomenal. They kept getting in these field goal ranges, and they kept missing the field goals. So many missed field goals.
We ended up in this game, I believe, with 4 missed field goals.
Yeah.
It's quite brutal.
Yeah, and that was, I think, also, didn't Paris miss one as well? I'm pretty sure. Like, the kicking has been a league-wide epidemic problem, but for the Galaxy to treat this as like a game that got away. You know what I mean? Like this was the one that they really needed to win. I think just to prove that they could hang with the title contenders in Paris, and they already lost to Rhein, but 25-22, and they lost by a field goal. I favored Paris by 10, and at some points it was that far off. And they kind of Paris let him back into it. A couple turnovers on their end. Zach still looks like an MVP candidate, but he fumbled the ball away for that, just before the second half ended. So he had 3 fumbles in the first half, 3 turnovers lost.
Yeah.
But Galaxy just couldn't capitalize.
Still ended up.
Yeah,
exactly. This was that was the story of today, or of this game. Galaxy being unable to capitalize. What do you think? These teams play 9 or 10 times. How many times did Paris win this matchup?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna go for. So we go 10 times. I'm gonna take Paris 7 of those. Yeah, I do think
that's
Paris
what
is a better team. Yeah, but it's just without those crucial fumbles at the beginning. We had that pick that got called back by Chandler Jones, and then the very next play, same pick, ball don't lie kind of moment. But that was
all
tough.
don't lie.
Yeah, he got a pick earlier on that slant where he cut through Michael's route. Like it was, he just created turnovers. The Paris defense looks legit, like really, really good. I want it to be. They only gave up like 14 points, or it's 15 points given the 2-pointer. But yeah, they looked great. Denmark, he's got himself a receiving touchdown and a return. He's already got like a rushing one. So I know what that man can't do. Like incredible game.
A little bit of everything, man. Yeah, Paris's defense just looking really good. Coach Mark Mattioli, their head coach, and DC running a tight ship with that defense. They're flying around, man. Dawson Dale's one of the other, I love to highlight American import linebackers. We only got 3. Dawson Dale's another one looking good, proving to the ELF that an American linebacker just might be worth it, man. Matt, what is your opinion on that?
I mean,
what is your opinion on that?
He got ran through by Luke on that truck.
It happens.
Tough one.
It happens.
It does happen. You are right, and he is a phenomenal linebacker. But yeah, it's kind of a difficult one, right? Because the Galaxy have kind of said about how they're very publicly 2 DBs is the way that they're going to run it for the foreseeable future. We've seen the offense where the running back don't work, and the kind of comparisons to linebacker. But I think the linebacker can certainly work with a team like Milan, like Wroclaw have got, like Paris as well. Of course, that's the 3 import linebackers. So last year with him in black at the Munich Ravens, he was really good. Like I really do think it can work. I just think that he has to be he has to be a top level, like AJ, like Zach. Like these guys have to be elite level. And Dawson Dales, of course, is one of those. It's just, do you sacrifice the pass game? Do you sacrifice the run? Because most linebackers are going to be run predominant defenders.
Right.
Paris do have the athleticism at outside linebacker with Denmark Heath, with Digan Gomez. So I think they can go with it and just have someone like Dawson Dales who can go after the quarterback. Then it works perfectly. I don't think the Paris need another American DB. They got Marcel Beard, they got Kane Ferret, they've got Amir Kalani, they've got Saeed. They've got such good DBs as a homegrown that I think they can afford to have an American linebacker, and I think it works.
Yeah, a team like Paris with all this talent in defensive backfields, I think that it can work for them there. But this game ended up coming down to the end here. Those missed field goals ended up just really costing Frankfurt. They've got to be looking at their kicking game this morning, wondering if there's anything that should be changed there, because, man, that one got away from we end up with 25-22 for the Paris Musketeers, coming out strong, man, 2-0. I've heard from a few people that they're still not buying Paris. Are you buying Paris?
Oh,
Matt?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you'll see probably today I'm going to release a power ranking. Paris are top 2 and they ain't number 2. Like, I've got them as probably my best team at the moment. Them and Serge.
Whoa!
I know, right? Breaking news. I got them, Serge, and the Vienna team as being my top 3. Wroclaw, we'll talk about them in a minute. Fell, Rhein Fire have fallen. Madrid is still kind of figure out. They're only 2 games in, but I'm going to put them near the top. But I'm buying Paris stock and I'm taking it all away. I think that they're heavily favored for a championship this game.
This is a wild lead, man. To think that a second-year franchise started from scratch can be this competitive and in the conversation already as a possible championship contender. We're going to see how this all plays out. But one thing we know for sure, the Western Conference is brutal. It's going to be fascinating to see who comes out of this conference. So that's where we had over in Paris. Now, an Eastern Conference matchup, Fehervar Enthroners, Berlin Thunder. Another one that was a bit of a blowout, not too much of a thrill. I don't think that we're too surprised by this one. Matt, can you talk to me about this matchup here out east?
Yeah, I mean, I said at the beginning of the game I favored them by 40. And what was the exact margin of error? 40. So I'm
You
calling
call that?
that
Did you
one.
say you favored them by 40?
Yeah. I said that win by 40.
I told you.
And then they did.
I got with me the wizard of the ELF right here.
Yeah, but to be fair, I said Barcelona will win. And no, just ignore that part. Look at the part where I
Except
said
for that
40.
one.
Right,
Except for that one.
But some of
Cut
them
that
look
out.
great again. Like I felt bad for the Enthroners that they had their man go out. So they had to have the homegrown in. So one of a couple teams that had to do that this week. The offensive line troubles again. Like no one could really get open on offense. If we have like a breakout player of the year award, I think if we do, we got to give it to Bias Kuenda. Like he was again really, really good for receiver for Berlin. The running game working a lot more for Berlin. They spread the ball out a lot. They had multiple people going for rushes. I think they had like 7 or 8 Russian players. Defensively held up. Few missed kicks again. Jackson looks like the best returner in the league this year because of Voslav splitting carries, but Jackson's got 2 in 3 games, and he needs only a few more to break the record. He needs 3 more to tie up last season's record, and he's got the rest of the season to do it. So that could be something we see broken this year. For Hervar, they tried the D-line experiment. It's not really worked. They haven't got through to the quarterback very much. Jabari Regan got a really good play on Jacob Sullivan, absolutely nailed him to get the ball out. And that's about really where the praise ends for Hervar. Like they really did struggle. Roby couldn't get much to the ball. He only had 3 catches for 29 yards. I think that's more so on them having a homegrown backup quarterback in than any compliment on Robitaille's ability because he's fantastic.
Right.
They just kind of we all kind of thought give it to him for a win because Berlin's gonna walk in and it's not gonna be much of an issue for him.
Yeah, we got the Enthroners are still trying to figure it out here, of course. And Berlin is an interesting team, man. Obviously, they had that first game against the Panthers that they played pretty close and ended up being a really good game. And stomping on a team like the Enthroners, I'm not sure what exactly that says of how they're going to compete against some of these other teams that are a little bit better. So I'm really curious to see Berlin playing Vienna and playing Rovsla again. But there are flashes, and here we see that kick return touch. Is this the touchdown? Yep.
Yes,
look
phenomenal.
At that.
8
Aaron
Jackson. Like he turned upfield, broke tackle from I think 7 or 8 different Enthroners. Like that was insane. That might be the best return we've seen. Ever.
This is what we love. These highlight plays in the ELF. These type of plays that go viral on social media. Spread the look at him turning around, bro.
Unbelievable, right? The dexterity in his feet and his ankle bend is like I was talking about on stream when it happened. I was like, that's like elite level athleticism.
Bro, if we got to start doing top 10 play Sports Center style, this would be probably number 1 of the week.
I think that's gonna be number 1.
Yeah, this one ended up being a blowout here. Berlin Thunder stomping on the Enthroners. Not much going there for the Enthroners. And the final score at 43-3, the exact prediction that had made 40 points for them. And there we see it right there. Actually, going back from the chat here, Thomas Lustig, this is going back to the Frankfurt game. He said, hold out that breakout player award for Kevin Kaya. What do you think about that?
I mean, Kevin Kaya played in the CFL. Like, it was as a breakout. We already knew Kevin Kaya was going to be good. Like, he played with the Carabins over in U Sports, and he went over to the CFL. So I wouldn't class him in the same category as a breakout because he was already like brought in as an receiver to be that guy. He was excellent, but Bias has been in this league for a few years, and now is starting to pick up more momentum, and he looks really good. Right. And he's a homegrown player. So Kevin Kaya, great. True. Breakout, I don't think he fits into that category because we already knew he was going to be really good.
Doesn't fit the category. I think I agree with you there, Matt.
Yeah.
So this next game, also out in the East, the Vienna Vikings and the Wrocław Panthers. This, to me, is actually one of the most interesting games of the week. It got a little bit overshadowed by the excitement of the Madrid Bravos beating the Rhein Fire. But this one, I'm really excited to talk about this one. Now I'll let you start it off. Talk about the Vienna Vikings and the Panthers here. The Vikings, just so we all know, Ben Holmes, their starting quarterback, is out. And he did not play in this game. So they had an adverse week heading into this.
Yeah, I mean, Rochelle deserves one hell of a shout. That was an absolute laser beam he threw at the middle as towards the second half.
Yes.
Incredible throw. That's the kind of throw you want to see from your backup quarterback to shots. Carabajani ran the ball well, but defensively, oh my God, sublime defensive performance. Blau's credited with Leon Ball's credited with 5 sacks. They had Swancourt got a sack and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Schaefer looked incredible. Amir Lalo looked phenomenal from inside the slot as a linebacker safety kind of hybrid. Because I thought they play him at corner at the start of the year, and I was like, I don't know, he's a little bit slow. It's a bigger guy, so they play him at safety. They played him at nickel, and I thought it worked so well because he looked great. They had Grimmerstaden as well. Like the whole defensive unit, that might be a contender for the best defensive unit in the league. They really rushed Duncan. Duncan looked like a lot of people in the Panthers comment sections are saying that Duncan, isn't the guy for that team. And I had to disagree. Like the receivers dropped a lot of balls. The receivers couldn't get open. Duncan wasn't perfect. Like he'd spent too long in the pocket. It didn't take what he could get, and he took 2 sacks in the end zone for a safety and a touchdown.
Right.
But like the receivers couldn't get open. The defense just absolutely locked up. Rochelle did what he needed to do. He got the yards. The run game was supporting him, and the Panthers, I think, kind of felt like they were owed a win in this game. I kind of got that feeling. They thought, they got a backup, we'll be fine. And then they
Right.
played down. Like they did not play well, like really on any level. And I just wanted to really quickly touch on why are they splitting return duties. They got a special team player of the year who got 7 touchdowns, 5 of those on kick return. And they got Bender, who is a great player. But Devin Burrell should be getting every single punt and kick return. I don't get why they're not giving him that chance to shine. I don't think he's got one yet. And he
No.
had 7 last year.
Yeah. Doesn't have one yet. That is a very interesting choice to limit his touches in the special teams. I mean, that's what he's really been known for last year. So interesting there. Yeah, man. I mean, you touched on it. The Vienna Vikings defense looked phenomenal, just flying around. And I actually, because I didn't get a chance to watch this game, but then I watched the condensed game on the Game Pass, the 25-minute condensed game. Yep. And after watching that, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta talk to Coach Kalika. So I talked to him this morning and just asked him his thoughts on this game. And what was sort of the mindset going into this, because this is their starting quarterback is hurt. They had a couple other key players injured, not being able to play this week. So tons of adversity. I think that Coach Kalaikai is probably one of the few head coaches who could lead a team to a victory in this type of situation on the road. No starting quarterback, missing a couple other key players, pulling a guy out of retirement to be the backup quarterback, Chris Gross, who did end up going into the game and doing just fine as well. Of course, Reichel taking the majority of the load in the first half. And you already talked about one of his touchdown passes that just looked fantastic, but just stepping in there. But to me, this win really speaks to Vienna Vikings culture. And that's why I touch on the head coach, Chris Kalaikai, of just establishing a culture here of, no matter who's out, who's missing, we are a team, and we're going to take care of each other and pick up the slack. You saw the defense just absolutely step up. The offense, the limited offense, did what they needed to do. And man, you touched on it. That defensive line is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. But this really reminded me of the Stuttgart Surge situation last year, where the Surge had a lot of quarterback adversity. They had to rotate and get a couple different guys in there, but still were able to piece together these wins. And this is very similar because the Vikings know that Ben Holmes is going to be back. He's their guy still. That's what Coach Kalaikai said. But for these other guys to be able to step in and this team to come away with a victory, and I think this is really a statement victory and says a lot about the Vienna Vikings. Matt, do you think this says more about the Vikings or the Panthers?
I think this more says, I agree with you with the Vikings point. So I think that last season they had a bit of a cakewalk into the year. They got that one win against the Enthroners. It was 21-20 right at the end of the year. And that was the first bit of adversity they faced all season. They went to the playoffs, lost, didn't make it to the championship game. This is their adversity this year, and they faced it early. So now they're going to be a lot more prepared when it comes later. And I think that's really important to keep in mind for the latter half of this year. They've already dealt with that. They beat one of the people we thought could be title contenders with an
Right.
unbelievable defensive performance, with a backup quarterback and with injuries to receiver position. They've done that. They don't need to prove anything else now. They had the easier schedule, and then they beat one of the best teams with this kind of like deficit. So they proved to me that they're an elite team. I had doubts going in. All those doubts are gone. Like, they're an elite team.
Yeah. It's weird, man. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to analyze it because somehow for me, Vienna always just not necessarily that they fly under the radar, but we don't talk about them so much as them being so exciting as we do about like a Paris or Rhein Fire or even the Stuttgart Surge. And maybe it's because they've just been around for so long. They've been good every single year. It's like, yeah, Vienna Vikings are good again this year, but they really are a team that I think is shaping up to be a title contender this year. I love the point that you made there, Matt, about them getting this adversity, because I agree 100% that was a huge problem for them, is just having a nice, easy season throughout the East last year, of course, making it to the playoffs, and then, face the Stuttgart Surge, who had their fair share of adversity last year, and the Surge were able to come out on top. So Vikings getting this adversity early, knowing that they're going to get their starting quarterback back later in the year, good for them. And I think this says a lot about the Vikings that we see 16-13. But this was a very interesting game as well.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see me a couple in the chat there. G Money says the quarterback cost the victory for the Panthers. Matt, you touched on it. There's a little bit, Stephen Duncan, and that some people, even in like the Panthers social media posts, are saying he's not the guy for this team. But you say you think he is the guy. But what's going on here? Is it? Can you put all the blame on the receivers?
It has to go somewhat to the receivers. Like, last season during film, we saw with Dresden Monarchs, he makes sometimes some rash decisions. We saw a little bit of that in the game. But, man, they dropped a lot of balls. Go back and watch some of that full game. You'll just see drop. Like, it killed the offense. The offensive line wasn't as good as it was in the previous weeks. He got sacked 2 times. And granted, he wasn't picking his spots. He seemed a little bit reluctant to pull the trigger on some of the plays that he had previously. I'm not sure if he was overthinking, if he was banged up, if it's just he saw something on film that he wasn't. I wouldn't want to test Weapon X either. Hunter Nichols is one of the best. You know what I mean? Hunter Nichols is one of the best safeties in the league. But yeah, he did look reluctant. I just don't think the blame's all on him. I think you got to acknowledge those drops. So there was at least 5.
So you stick with Stephen Duncan as a quarterback if you're running the Panthers.
Yeah. He had 2 good games in the first week. They're 2-1. I don't see any reason to we don't want to blow this out of proportion. He was good. He scored a bunch of points. One thing they have struggled with is scoring points, but this week was maybe just a bit of a down week.
Right. Yeah, I feel on that. And that is so true. The Panthers have scored a lot of points in previous games. What was it, 34 and 39? So they're putting up points. This was just this is more props to Vienna's defense for holding that offense, holding them to 13 points. So there we have it, 16-13. A very interesting matchup out in the East. The Vienna Vikings battling through some adversity, and we'll see where this takes them for the rest of the year. And then finally, an inter-conference matchup. Munich Ravens and the Prague Lions, another one that turned out to be a little bit of a one-sided show, but maybe there's some insights we can take away from this. Matt, what do we got on here?
Yeah, I mean, this one was over before it really began. I think we kind of knew they were going to struggle. They're without their top receiver in Phillips Jackson. They're without Daniel Wright, who I had one of the best safeties. I played him a corner a little bit more, which I didn't understand. But he's out. Phil Jackson's out. I think before the game, we were like, it's going to be a Ravens win. And it was convincing. I mean, Kyrie Lyles, he's a fine quarterback, but he had milliseconds just like Lewis did, but he had probably less time. Yeah. He was getting sacked on the handoffs again, like another player that he was getting wrapped up with against a really good defensive line of Munich Ravens. I felt bad for him. He only had Radim Kadius, who they knew that they were going to go to, so he just covered him with an American corner, and it's kind of hard to really get off of him. I mean, Darius St. Robinson's one of the best corners we've had in the league. Nitznander is another excellent European. So when you've got really one option at receiver, and they've got 2 DBs that can cover him, and you've got a quarterback that didn't get any time, and a running game that can't get started because the offensive line's so bad. I think it was kind of written at, what is it, like 39-0 at half? Something ridiculous like that.
It was.
Yeah, Rodney played well. I think a running back for the Ravens are without a will, which is a problem. Chad Jeffries looks kind of more locked in, but it's a big win on a bad team. So I'm still a
That's
little bit reluctant,
That's
to
the
call them a
thing,
contender.
Matt. That's what I want to ask you and I want to talk to you about. Obviously, we all saw Ravens had a lot of buzz, a lot of hype coming into the season, made big moves in the offseason. So a lot of excitement, and then came out a little bit flat in week 1 against the Surge. A little bit of a dud in the performance there. We know the Surge is one of the top teams, so it's kind of understandable there. But then these last 2 weeks, they played the Milano Seaman, 132-0. Then they play the Prague Lions, crushing them 51-7. So it's interesting because these last 2 wins, how meaningful are they in your opinion? And how good are the Ravens actually?
I mean, it does build up momentum, and I think that's important to recognize because a couple wins under your belt, your confidence goes up, you get better. They do have I believe, the easiest strength of schedule in the entire league.
That's true.
So that's going to be helping them trying to make a playoff push. They missed the playoffs last year, of course. But I think what stood out to me a little bit more was just depth at receiver. I was very critical in the last couple of weeks about the depth receivers not doing enough. Marvin Rush, Lawrence Regler, they really did do well. Regler with 2 touchdowns, Rush with 130 yards. John Cole isn't what Castle was last year, and I think that's caused maybe some kind of stunting on the offense because Castle was so good, and it's hard to really live up to that. But defensively, much improved from last season, from the previous weeks. Flowers looks good. I already mentioned other corners. The rush was getting home. They look improved, and it is a big win for them in terms of gaining a little bit of confidence. But that division is easier. I do think the Raiders are still up there for the taking.
Yeah, it's a great point. That it is just pretty easy right now. Here in the chat, Jetzler TV, or sorry, I can't read the name. It says, as a Ravens fan, Munich offense is still not equal to last year, and that's just what you touched on there. Castle, huge hole to fill. Cole, just from what we've seen so far, not really living up to the ghost of Castle from last year. And they're playing the Raiders next week. So this is what I think could be a very interesting matchup because I think I'm kind of unsure about both of these teams. Yeah. Raiders just stomped on Barcelona. Ravens just stomped on Prague. How are these two teams going to look against each other? I know, again, this is not our prediction show for next week, but what are kind of your initial thoughts on that matchup?
Oh, I'm going to get some blowback for this.
Let's go.
But me and my friends called us a bit of a mid-off, like where both teams are kind of just in the middle of the pack. It's a bit of a mid-off. It's kind of who's going to come second in the Central. They're very similar, just in all facets of the game. The Raiders have got 101 points. The Ravens got 103. The Raiders have given up 34. The Ravens have given up 41. Not sure if I always get them, the names, so to always get them the wrong way around. But they are very similar teams. But I am still favoring the Ravens. They have a more established quarterback. We don't really know what's going on with the quarterback situation in the Raiders. They have quite a similar run style. The Ravens do have the better offensive line because the Raiders' offensive line is still questionable. It had improvements, but against on the bad D-line of the Barcelona Dragons. I still favor the Ravens in pretty much every way. So I'm going to go for them for the win, personally.
Yep.
And, I said about the preseason, the Raiders I thought were going to fall off a little bit, and they do kind of seem like they're going to sit in just a mid-table finish.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they're just like right on the cusp of the playoff conversation at the end of the year, or even if they're in it. In the chat here, Balu, this is going back to the previous game. Balu says it'll be interesting to see how the Vikings fare against the Thunder next week, possibly without Holmes again. It's a great point. I think that this will be another really interesting test for that Vikings team. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they make another move at quarterback. Do they bring in an A temporarily? Because this last game was such short notice that they just had to go with somebody that was kind of local in the area. But maybe they bring in another temporary A. But yeah, that'll be very interesting to see. If the Vikings can keep picking up wins, even without their starting quarterback, that's really will position them. That's huge, man. Yeah. Oh, we got Jamal in the chat. Oh, Jamal's in here. He's recovering from the mercenary. Jamal, we are so sorry, man. We knew we couldn't have you on the show today because you feel too emotional about that Mercenaries.
You just have his head in his hands for the whole hour. Just yeah, that wouldn't
No,
be.
no. Matt, question for you. We talked a little bit about how last year the Vikings didn't have much adversity, and then it kind of showed up in the playoffs. We've been talking a little bit how the Central Conference is a little bit lower half is quite weak. The middle is maybe a bit mid. The Surge are obviously a very good team. Are you concerned about the Surge having that issue from last year of not having enough adversity and challenges throughout the season? I know it's early, but what are your thoughts on that topic?
I think it's valid. I think they'll be probably okay. They've got a lot of returning players from last season where they lost in the championship game, and I think that's going to help. You know, Hennessy didn't get a full season under his belt, still looked great last year. They've got players like Geyer and Meyer and Stewart who are there from last season. They actually withheld a hell of a lot of their players. They've also got players that have been on like bad teams that are coming into now a good team, good players and bad teams, like Chad Walrent at safety.
Yep.
Spent some time in Cologne as part of good defense, was kind of a slept on safety, is now been part of a really good defensive unit and is allowed to shine. The Giovanni brothers, you got NFL experience in this area. Like you just have a bunch of players I think have already dealt with adversity, so don't necessarily need it now. I think they'll probably be fine. Like that's my expectation. Is that
Yeah.
they've got a lot of veterans, and I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they had it last year and they've returned so many. I mean, you were touching on offense. It's only one new starter on the offense. So it's the same unit as last year. And that defense, a lot of those key people. And of course, the coaching staff is all the same there. So kind of the experience from that adversity holds true. Looking at these standings, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but it's just when we look at the standings, it's hard to not talk about it and see, especially in the Western Conference, the Frankfurt Galaxy, and Matt, you touched on it, one of only 4 teams who are winless this season. Would you say that is one of the biggest surprises of our standings here after week 3 for you?
I think a lot of people would be surprised. I did think they were going to lose both of them at the start of the year, and that might be to me just giving like a LeBron take of people. I always knew it was going to happen, but I did favor them to lose both of them. They have had the unfortunate, start of the schedule with the fire and also with
True.
and with the bye week too. They had like a really early bye week, which never helps any of the teams. Like they're
True.
already starting on the wrong foot, but they arguably could have, in a different world, won both of those. I don't think it's a massive cause for concern either, but I'm not entirely surprised. But I think a lot of people were that they've fallen both of them.
It's just so interesting to see, man. That Western Conference, I know we keep saying it, it's absolutely wild. Actually, here in the chat as well, Thomas Lustig brings up a great point, kind of pivoting here about a big signing this week. Raheem Wilson, who's joining the Surge defense. Christian down on IR. Raheem Wilson spent the last 5 years in the CFL. He's a guy that I got to play with for 2 years on the Schlegershaw Unicorns. One of the best DBs, just absolute lockdown, fantastic guy. And he played, of course, for Johnny Brenner and Cody Pastorino, Jordan Newman with the Unicorns. Now he's reuniting with his old coaches. That's just only going to bolster that Surge defense even more, man.
Yeah, they're going to look real good. I mean, he's 45 starts in the CFL, something like that. Obviously, you mentioned already experience within the coaching staff, so he's just going to pick that scheme up like it's nothing.
God, man, there's just so much going on in this league this year. We're just getting started. We're week 3. We can talk about this. We got to wrap it up, guys. We're not supposed to go too long on this show. And so we see a couple of things in the chat before. Eric Personal, does anyone know about the injury of Chris Helbig? Doesn't say anything public yet. Didn't look great. He got carted off. Rumors. These are rumors that he's probably going to be out for the season. We don't know anything for sure. But Eric, we were touching on it earlier in the show, how we all have got to give a kind of our props to Chris Helbig for what he's done for the Bravos and in turn done for the league. Yeah, Matt, I think that's got to be it. And before we keep going down rabbit holes, because we could do this forever.
Yeah, all day.
Yeah. Appreciate you, man. I love hearing your takes. It's fantastic, guys. In the chat, you guys rock. Marcus, you rock. Thank you guys for being here with us on Monday morning. We will have a Thursday show as well, where we'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming schedule. Make sure you check out Matt's YouTube channel, Matt Bressington, for all of the best ELF takes and his live watch alongs on the weekend. You get your Game Pass set up And then you got Matt on the YouTube. That's what I do, man. That's what I was doing yesterday. I was in your chat.
Appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much.
Hell yeah, man. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Exciting stuff. And we will see you on Thursday and another exciting week of ELF football ahead. Peace out.
Bye.